Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. Steve and I are here today. We're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to talk about equipment, specifically survival equipment. Um, you could say survival. It's also like emergency preparedness. It's kind of the same thing. So
Yeah.
you can use it for a zombie apocalypse, but it's also just as useful if you're dealing with a hurricane or some other kind of severe weather. So that's going to be the topic today. Steve, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah. Well, and also I've seen this on a couple other podcasts. I've seen former military guys just chiming in on their thoughts on how to be prepared. That's really what it is. I, I I mean, you never know. Anything can happen. I look at it as just being prepared for me and my loved ones if in the event of a natural disaster, could be like you say, hurricane, tornado, earthquake. We have a huge earthquake fault that runs through here called the New Saint Madrid fault.
Mm.
The New Madrid fault is what it's called. So you never know. So it's mostly just in case. Yeah, I got to hit the road. And I've had a lot of. Well, it's more the questions have come more from my friends who are civilians, never been in the military, and it's not to say that I'm some guru survivalist. Some military guys go in that direction and have become like professional survivalists and do podcasts and stuff on that. And there's lots of good ones out there. I don't think it would hurt to check them out. But just a couple of just practical things that I thought I'd throw out, and having been asked this question before, how to be prepared. Well, so for me, the first thing I have is a go bag. And I do, when I say that, I don't always have it exactly squared away like I would like. It's one of those things I keep meaning to throw in one more thing or this thing.
Hmm.
I really should be diligent to do that. You never know how much time you're going to have if the heathen hordes come over the horizon with pitchforks and swords.
Hmm.
But I assume I'm not going to have a lot of time. So that's a presupposition the way I look at it. So the go bag has everything I'll need. I don't touch it. I may refresh it, and I'll get into some of what I might need to refresh. But yeah, I just keep it ready to go. It's a backpack. It's a Kelty backpack that is pretty big, pretty substantial. I um, I have used it. It's really heavy duty, and it's big enough to carry everything I need, which is a fair amount of stuff if you really want to be prepared. So,
Hmm.
so there's that. Um, so some of what you know I have listed out for myself is kind of almost like the psychologist Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's what it's a hierarchy of things that are going to keep me alive. So you could start with a very basic level and just say, well, water. Okay, that's
Yeah.
going to be of utmost importance first. So I have what's called a Katadyn water filter. It is a ceramic based water filter. Katadyn is one of the best. It's Swiss made. We carried them in the military. It filters water down to like I don't know. It's like 1 micron. I mean, it's like it gets everything, viruses, giardia. And we use them in Malaysia and I mean, pumped water into our canteen cans with some stinky, stinky smelling water. I
Mm.
don't know what was in it, but it was nasty and we were fine. Nobody even got the runs, nothing. So they work. So I have one of those. I also have, a pot and a pan for cooking. So I could always, and along with fresh water, I have fire, a fire source, a heat source. That's
Hmm.
almost unthinkably important in the situation because you can also boil water. If something were to go down with my Katadyn, I could boil water and make it clean enough to drink, potable. And then I also do carry one of those old school iodine
Hmm.
uh,
The
just
tablets.
bottles that you drop iodine in.
Oh,
Yeah.
with drops. Oh, okay.
And you can also use bleach, by the way. You don't want to use much, but I think it's you could Google it, but I think it's like 3 or 4 drops per gallon of bleach will
Hmm.
kill everything in there. So yeah, those are some just basic level things I have in my kit. My go bag.
Are
That
you
yeah.
what about that makes sense. So and when you describe the bag, is it kind of like is it like backpacking size, like
Mhm.
kind of ruck size more or
Yeah,
less? Is that the size of it?
it's a ruck size. It's a little deeper than a ruck.
Mhm.
Our military rucks ride a little higher because you have stuff around your waist.
Yeah.
This thing goes down but pretty much almost to my butt.
Mhm.
So it's a big pack. It's like a yeah, North Face, Kelty. You can find them
Like
anywhere. The
one of those style.
bigger packs.
Is this where are you what how does this like fit into like your overall preparedness strategy? So is this like something you're keeping in your house? Is this something you're
Yeah,
keeping in your car? It,
I keep it in my house. I probably should keep it in my car because when I'm home, my car's home.
Mhm.
And if I'm out and about and the world ends, probably be a better place to keep it. I just bought a new one of these Rivian electric trucks.
You did?
Yeah, it it's an R1T truck.
Okay.
It's 825 horsepower.
Okay.
It can smoke a Ferrari in the quarter mile,
Well,
but
you were
it's four-wheel drive, so it's kind of cool.
yeah, you well, I remember you talking about one of those electric F-150s. I didn't know you go
Yeah,
for the Rivian.
I
Rivian came out of nowhere for me. I
yeah.
swear it was only I never heard of it, and then within the last year, I started seeing them out on the roads. I'm
Seeing
like, what is that?
what is
And then I
that?
looked it up. I'm like, Rivian? I never heard of it, but now they're everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, it has off-road mode, so um it's just great. But it's got this storage compartment that goes under behind between the bed and the back seat, and I can put a golf club bag in there. And
An
so
important part of
actually,
preparedness.
yeah, you don't want to be without your golf clubs in the end of the
You
world.
need hobbies. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
something to take your mind off the suffering. But I could just slide it in there. I think that you just gave me a good idea. I'm just going to slide my pack in there, and then I got it. But yeah, yeah, that's kind of the thinking. I think of it in terms of what is most important. So guns. Okay,
Hmm.
I have a. I'm usually thinking I'll probably have somebody with me,
Hmm.
my partner, um, maybe even my parents if they live nearby me here. My property, they're getting up there in age, so they would need extra help.
Hmm.
Um, so okay, so I've got several firearms, like a lot of ex-military guys. I'm partial to a 45 for a handgun. I just like the bullet. I like the close range knockdown, basically that it has.
Hmm.
Punches a pretty good hole. And I carry a Glock. Now I have a tricked out 1911 Ed Brown special, which is like my dream gun of all times. My dad got it for me for my PhD graduation. It's like a
Right.
$3,500 custom. I mean, he machines every part of that. So it's like one of the best performing 45s in the world. I mean, you could shoot professionally with it. But and I like it on the range and just to show off and say, look what I can do. Look at me. But I would carry my Glock 45 if need be because it holds more bullets. It's incredibly reliable. I think Glocks are one of the most amazingly reliable weapons I've ever seen. I've never had mine jam. I've never had that thing jam.
Yeah,
So that
they're
goes
just
a long way with
bricks.
me.
They're bricks. You pull the trigger and every time, boom
Yep.
every time. It's great.
Yeah, your safety is your finger, and
Yeah.
you know what condition it's in, and it's like pretty straightforward. And that's
Mhm.
one thing I just tell people about. They ask about self defense weapons, again, largely civilians saying, or what should my wife have? I say something that's simple, a revolver or a Glock to where you pull the trigger, a bullet comes out. You get into these systems like SIG P226s and stuff, and it's got decocking levers, safe multiple safety figures. You can shoot it double action first pull, single action if you cock it's like too much to remember. I mean, if you're shooting on the range with that every day, like we were, it was like I didn't have to think about it. I just pull it
Mhm.
out, pop, pop, pop. But
Mhm.
now it's like, what? what conditions it in? I
Mm,
would rather just have a gun, and the 1911's like that too, because it's locked and cocked.
mhm.
The safety's on, but it's always, I know what condition it's in. My friend Kevin was visiting one time, and he flew here, so I knew he didn't have a gun, and he was staying in a cabin on my farm. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm guessing you weren't packing coming down here." He goes, "Nope." So I handed him my Glock. I said, "Yeah, just in, I mean, he and his wife were staying in the cabin, and I said, well, here you go." And he said, "You know what condition it's in?" And he goes, "Yep." And of course, he checked it. But it's that kind of thing. So keep it simple.
Mhm.
KISS, keep it simple, stupid. We used to say in the military. So that's my handgun, 45, and then I have two primary weapons, I would call them. One is it's an automatic, it's a semi-automatic shotgun, a 12 gauge, and then I have an AR. It's a 223 5.56 Smith and Wesson. It's just a straightforward old school AR, and I've got probably four mags. That's if you're having to shoot more than a mag, things are just going south. I mean, somebody asked me one time, and I mean, then the entire Gulf War. I mean, we were there for well almost a year, and with live engagements. Other than the time I had to engage with a minigun, with a primary weapon, I don't think I shot more than 100 rounds, other than like not on the range, but like
Right.
out and about. I don't think
Mhm.
I shot more than 100 rounds in the entire Gulf War.
Mm.
So it gives you a little perspective. I mean, people think, endless shooting, if it, if it gets to that, hiding and seeking cover and concealment would be a better option than direct engagement, because I don't know what you'd be fighting. I don't know whether it'd be a government force or militia or a group of Red Dawn. I mean, who knows?
Or
But
if the Cubans invaded,
yeah, that's
uh,
right.
or the what it was the Cubans for the original, and then it was
Yeah,
North Koreans for the other one. Yeah,
yeah,
anyone who's listening to this, you're better off running away. I mean,
yeah,
and it has nothing to do with skill set or experience.
yeah.
That's it. In those situations, you should just run away. I
And
don't
the
know if
other
you're
thing,
Jason Bourne, you should be running
yeah,
away. You're not
I
supposed.
am Jason Bourne, but not
Yeah.
everybody could be. I'm totally kidding. But yeah, so the other thought is that if I have somebody else with me, they can, if I have to, I'll just sling that shotgun and
Hmm.
patrol, walk with my
Hmm.
AR. But if I have somebody else with me, I'll let them carry one of them. And I'm thinking more toward hunting. Okay, so I'm
Sure.
thinking more
Right.
toward how do I eat, and water's covered,
Hmm.
but I got to feed myself. You can go surprise, especially at my weight at 55, can go surprisingly long burning fat.
Mm.
But water is the big one. But yeah, so I have a gun that I could peg an animal that's a large mammal. And then I also have a shotgun that I can, in addition to being a defensive weapon, could use to hunt birds, turkey, quail. We have all kinds of birds around here, and other things that's easier to get with a shotgun than a long gun.
What do you think about 22 LR, something like that for, I mean, because most of what you might be
Yeah,
running across would probably be small game
small
and
game.
that type of stuff. My brother, for a little while, he ended up selling it, but he had one of those. I don't think it was an actual military one, but it was modeled after like a air crew survival rifle,
Yeah,
22 LR. So
I
like
like
it had the
those.
butt stock,
Hmm.
and then you were a parachute rigger, so you probably, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this. But then like so you had the butt stock, and then everything else basically could break down and then fit inside the butt
Yeah,
stock.
yeah. It's those are nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you had two go bags,
Hmm.
you put one in one, yeah, those are great. And it would be small game, rabbit, squirrel. I mean, stuff that you could, it's a little harder with birds. That's where a shotgun, some of those survival guns, and I am so out of touch with like what's the latest, greatest, but some of those have, they're an over under barrel where you could shoot a 22 or like a 410 shotgun.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
I've seen stuff like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So then that might be the ultimate, because then you have some, a dual purpose one piece system. But those are my thoughts on, weapons. Like I say, I'm more concerned about hunting and providing protein if
Hmm.
need be, rather than defending myself. But of course, do that as well.
What about where does at some point we got to get to first aid, but since we're just on
Yeah,
the
oh, that's a big one. Yeah,
on the topic, um, how does fishing work into your plans at all?
I have a yep, that's another good one. I have a mini. It's a little ultralight pole that breaks down real small. It just telescopes out
Mm,
with an open face reel and hooks. Really, I've got a couple lures in with my pole that tend to do well. And here's another thing. Like, I think you have to be a student of the place you live. If
mm,
you're in Montana, you got to know what goes on in Montana. You're going to maybe need different to adapt the gear. I'm in Kentucky. It doesn't really get, I mean, it can get frigidly cold, but it usually doesn't last long here. In the summer, it's just easy pickings. It's like, um, I mean, you can sleep outside. You don't have to worry about the elements as much here in Kentucky. It's more mild uh, region of the country. We're mid South. I would consider us mid South. But so some of it, and then I know what fish around here are active. If you're at a trout stream, you're going to want a rig to think about catching trout. Here we're catching bass, bluegill, crappie, catfish. So I have lures that will be amenable toward those types of fish, and hooks to where I can almost always catch a fish with a worm and a bobber. Just throw it in. And now near me, see, because I'm assuming like 9 times out of 10, if I had to hole up, it would be somewhere on my 25 acres here in Kentucky. And we even have a cave system, which is kind of cool because that
nice.
provides other areas of bunkerhood. But I've access to three sizable, I would call them lakes. They're small lakes, but they're bigger than ponds, and they're loaded with. I mean, every cast you can throw it in, and you're getting a fish. So yeah, fishing would be probably my number one. It's just that at certain times of year, it's real cold. They go deeper and they don't bite as much. But
Mm,
again, knowing your place, knowing what, doing a little study of your environment, that's really important. I mean, we did that in the military. When you're going into a new place, you have briefs, you have classes on here. Okay, this is what the terrain's like. So yeah, that's another good one. I I didn't jot it down, but it's in there. It's in my go bag. um, yeah, you mentioned, and I think we should get into another one of the absolute most critical things. And a lot of people don't think about this. They think about, I mean, I talk to these young guys, which are who are friends of mine, but they're all into the gear and the cool tricked out weapon that's like beyond what I've ever even shot, much less own. I mean, there's so much incredible weaponry now. It's just like yikes. Um, but the first thing I tell them is, "What's your first aid kit look like?" And they're like, "Oh, oh, didn't think of that." It's one of the most important things,
mm.
up there with water and a fire source. So in my first aid kit, I don't know. You can buy. I just bought a big first aid kit. I mean, it's like uh, I don't know,
Right.
foot by a foot, or
Like an aid bag,
like
like
an
a,
8 bag.
yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
And then I have stuff from my old first aid kit and military stuff. And I have a couple of IVs. I have an IV bag.
Mm,
I have a tourniquet, like one of those professional
hmm,
tourniquets that you could, if God forbid you lost a limb or you had excessive bleeding,
hmm.
that might be the only route. I mean, you always wanted to use those last. And if you get into, it wouldn't hurt to take a CPR class and get certified as CPR. You could save somebody's life. I mean, we got it pounded into us in the military, so I know the compression rates. I know all that. I think I could do my best to keep somebody alive, but wouldn't hurt to take a first aid class. Just there's some nuances to it all. Um, I try to collect antibiotics. Well, I do. I don't just try. Occasionally I'll have something and my doctor will prescribe antibiotics. Um, and I try to use the minimum amount so I can stockpile them. So I like hoard antibiotics.
The medical doctors are cringing. They're like, "You're
Yeah,
supposed to take the full course, Steve."
I apologize, all you upstanding medical people out there, but I know that one of the most important things is if an infection sets in and I'm in the woods, uh, you know, so and I know a couple people who are like LPN or is that's licensed practical nurses, and they're friends of mine. I'm like, hey, can you hook me up with a little Z pack? And they're like, yeah, I think I can slide you one. And I don't know how they do it. I'm not asking any questions, but
Allegedly.
yeah,
Allegedly, they slide it.
they
You're
allegedly. But I do know that you can order these online from like Mexico and get them
yeah,
delivered. I
probably.
don't think it's a
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah. So there's ways to get them, but antibiotics is a big one. And then, I mean, just your basics,
Yeah.
ways to stop bleeding. I mean, we were always taught what's the first thing you do when somebody's bleeding heavily is direct pressure.
Return fire.
Yeah,
Establish
yeah.
fire superiority.
One thing I keep in my first aid kit that might surprise people, two things. I do have some Curl-X, which is it's highly absorbent. So if you had to pack a serious wound, it
Mhm.
will absorb a lot of blood. I also carry about 6, 8 tampons. Um, if Curl-X is more expensive and it's harder to get. You can get it online, but tampons are great. I mean, they just absorb a lot of blood. Um, and then also super glue. I have a whole pack of like several super glues because you can close up a pretty significant wound with super glue, and it's
Mhm.
sterile. It won't hurt you. I mean, there's more medical grade versions of this stuff because they use it in surgery and all that. But super glue is cheap and does the same thing, and it's not going to hurt you. It'll close the wound up pretty quick, like stitches. So a few things that you might not think about, but I think about.
These are good things just for day to day, and I think that's
Yeah.
maybe the point for all of it is that you're prepared in case of the worst that could happen. But sometimes they're just, you know, normal everyday small things that we run up into. One anecdote, I was out at the range, it was like 2 months ago at this point, and we're out on a flat range, just doing some pistols and rifle, and then hanging targets. And these are old wooden. These are the wooden popsicle stick type, and it's got staples and nails everywhere. And I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention. I put on, I actually put on. It was like an adhesive. It was like an adhesive
Yeah.
round reactive target, and then I slid my hand across it, my bare hand across it because it's adhesive. And then of course, like I cut myself I do like a cut across my hand, my one of my fingers
Yeah.
with, a rusted staple or nail, whatever had been there for who knows how long.
Right.
And I didn't even have a basic first aid kit in my car. I had to take Dunkin' Donuts napkins and we had tape. We had like range tape. So I'm like, pushing together, putting pressure, range tape. And we had just got there. So I was like,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to shoot through. I'm not leaving because my hand's bleeding. But that would have been a great time to actually, the moral of the story, I thought I had a first aid kit in my car.
Yeah.
So, I was surprised when I popped the trunk to see, "Oh, yeah, like, 3 years ago, we went to the
Right.
beach and I cleared everything out to make room and I never put
Yeah.
it back in." So and you were mentioning this, I think, before, which is about, checking, rechecking, restocking. Did you wanna get into that at all?
Yeah. Yeah. The things that I want to restock are things that might expire, like antibiotics, aspirin. It's good to have ibuprofen. Uh, things that would expire. Um, the need the and see probably there are going to be many people that are not going to go to the link to have an IV bag, and because you got to know how to hook it up. And I mean, we
Yeah.
practiced hooking it up on each other
Mhm.
back when, especially, I mean, we did it once a week. Our corpsman medic had us. He said, "I want to see everybody hook up a successful IV and get it dripping once a week, just to keep proficient." Because I mean, you really that's what so much of it is, and that's why, yeah. I mean, just from shooting to practicing safety principles. I mean, you got to really drill it in,
Mhm.
or when you're under duress, it's like you can't even remember what your name is, you know, when the
Mhm.
sky is falling.
Mhm.
So that's why it would help to keep refreshed on that kind of stuff. But yeah, IV, I would want to get new lactated ringers. You can get that stuff online. I mean, it's just saline water.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to have a prescription for it. I don't know about the needles. I got them from medics that I knew, so I
Right.
have a stockpile of those. They're also really good. The big, not the huge, but the medium gauge uh, needles. That's what
Mhm.
I call them. They're great for getting splinters out. If you get a real bad sliver, you can kind of just take the tip of it and kind of, they're just so damn sharp, you can just kind of cut back without it even really hurting that bad.
Mm.
They're good for stuff like that. Tweezers, things like that. But yeah, but really anything that would expire in the kit. Most stuff, if you just keep it sealed up and in a pack, like
Mhm.
band-aids and gauze bandages and
Yeah.
tape, that's not gonna it's not gonna
Right.
deteriorate. If it gets exposed to sunlight, it will break down, but
Mhm.
it's in a kit.
Or moisture.
Moisture, yeah.
I think, I think that goes back to probably one of the key skills you wanna cultivate, and I am also no expert, and I just detailed to you how I don't even have a first aid kit in my car, but that's something I gotta I like we were talking about before this, I know just enough to know that I'm woefully inadequate, like,
Yeah,
I don't have anything together, but one of the big skill sets you wanna maintain is is doing those checks. So anyone from a military background, you'll know them, pre-combat checks and
yeah,
inspections, right? Um, a lot of you probably still have a lot of old habits probably before, hopefully, before you go on like a long drive, cross country drive. You
yeah,
probably check your fluids. You probably think about your gas. You probably think about, topping it
totally.
off at strategic points, not letting it get too low.
Yeah,
And in terms of your personal equipment, right? You used to check your kit, check your weapon. If you have this stuff prepared, probably want to do the same thing, right? Work out a schedule, okay, before I go out on like a non-routine drive, um,
yeah.
let me pop the trunk and make sure that first aid kit's in there,
And even a routine drive, because here's this happened to me last summer. And I have a kit, a first aid kit in my truck.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving with a buddy and we had come up on a head-on collision. It had
Oh
just
man.
happened, and I'm like, "Oh, Lord, I hate blood. I really hate blood, but it's amazing what you can overcome when you see human beings suffering."
Right.
And all I saw was glass, spew coming out of the it just happened. We were the first vehicle to get there.
Wow.
Um, and there were eh, my buddy, he didn't know as much first aid. I grabbed my kit, I grabbed a bunch of Curlex and I said, "Go to that guy that he was there was so much blood, I couldn't believe it." He goes, I said, "Wherever the blood's coming from, just pack it with this." I went to a little boy, he was about 5 years old. His
Oh
face is
man.
just covered in blood. I'm like, I'm taking care of this kid." His mom was sitting there holding her chest crying, and, I just started whipping stuff out, put on rubber gloves, start soaking up the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And, because it takes it seems like forever for
Yeah.
emergency vehicles to get there. I mean, the first thing we did was dial 911, but it's like they say, call for a police officer, an ambulance, and a pizza and see what gets there first.
Yeah.
You know, so I hated it because it was just the guy died. He bled out.
Oh
He was
man.
just he had lost so much blood. He passed away. But the boy was okay. He needed to be stitched up, and I put antibiotic cream on him. That's another thing, Neosporin cream. Take that with you and buy it in by the lot, because
Right.
that stuff's really helpful. And got him to the hospital, and he was okay. He just had to be stitched up a little bit, but yeah, I mean, you can really help out in a situation, even when this was just like 15 minutes from my house.
Mm-hmm.
This happened, but
Well, you want to have, and that goes back to maybe the foundational concept, which is like personal responsibility, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to take care of yourself.
Yes.
It's your responsibility.
I think
Um,
so.
but also it's empowering to
Yeah.
be able to help yourself or to help others if the need comes. So,
Yeah.
um, as we're slowly winding down on time here,
Yeah.
for someone who's got nothing, they've got nothing, and they're like, Steve, these are great ideas. I want to start to do this.
Yeah.
Um, because there's so much to do, and the way
Yeah.
we've described it, it's kind of like it's an ongoing thing that you end up doing, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, people, they could have go bags, they could have, backup food and stuff in in their homes. Where do you think people should start who have nothing? And
Yeah. Well, what we've talked about already,
Mhm.
guns, take it or leave it. Some people just, if you're not proficient with a weapon, I would say be careful
I'd
because
second that.
get you into more trouble sometimes than
I'd say
not.
guns, absolutely. I'll go ahead and just say guns. If you don't know what you're doing, or you can only point to when you were a kid, you used to go
Yeah.
shooting with dad, put that last on the list.
Yeah. Last
Get
on
to
the
it
list.
eventually, but put
Yeah.
that last on your list.
The things we've mentioned, so fire source, med kit, um, I would also say rations. You, I have some dehydrated rations that are light, relatively light for when they're inflated with water. They can provide a lot of protein. I have just a big bag of rice because if you it can provide a lot of calories to get you by, and like your body can burn fat. It's a great weight loss program. So yeah, but I have rice because it fluffs up and it provides a lot of calories for relatively, weight's always an issue. A pot and a pan to boil water. I have a a topographic map of my area.
Mhm.
The Kentucky State Department of Forestry, I think, provides those, and they're,
Mhm.
I mean, these are like $10. And a map and compass, old school. That there again might require a little bit of training. I have one of those because obviously I'm going to have my phone with me. I don't know how long it's going to work, but I have a solar charger. It's about this big. I meant to bring it here and set it so I could show, but you can get them online, and it'll charge your cell phone, just with solar power.
Nice.
Takes a little longer. It's not like plugging it in, but hey,
For sure.
whatever. Gear as far as clothing, again, know your environment. If you're in Florida, you're probably not going to need expeditionary weight polypropylene Gore-Tex,
Right.
you know. But in here I have good Gore-Tex with a liner. I have my old military Gore-Tex that I got to keep. It's great, and it's going to keep me alive in this environment.
Mhm.
Boots, a good pair of boots, lace up above the ankle. So if you're in a arduous terrain, you don't, everything's about staying healthy, right? If you can think about it that way, I think that's a good guiding principle. My knee, if my my knee goes out or I twist my ankle, now it's a really big pain in the ass. It's a big pain in the ass to have to try to live off the land anyway.
Right.
But when you're hurt or cut or that's gets to be insane. So I like Merrell's. There's a lot of good boots, Salomon. I'm partial to Merrell's. I just had good luck with them. Uh, Go ahead and shell out $300. Make it your Christmas present to yourself. They're a good pair of boots because they're they'll hold up and serve you well,
Mhm.
even if you just go hiking and you like to go on trails. But yeah, certainly. Um, Insect repellent. Again, know your environment. Here we have ticks, chiggers, we have things that suck. It just, again, reducing the suck factor. The last thing you want is Lyme's disease or Lone Star disease, and the ticks carry these diseases. There's any number of. I also have a utility knife and a large knife like this one, which can chop trees down, saplings, and I can chop wood, make a shelter. It's very sharp. It's very durable. And then I have a utility knife for small stuff like skinning or cutting, a fixed blade, stainless steel fixed blade. There's a million of them out there. A pair of binoculars, because I want to be able to reach out and see whatever it might be,
Mhm.
game, people approaching.
Again, hobby. Again, if you need end of the world hobbies, you could do some birding.
Yeah, there
Um,
you go.
I think if I remember correctly, and my guess is any state emergency management, bureau or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
I think they publish sort of lists too. So
Yeah, they do.
you were just sort of rattling off a bunch of great stuff that you should have, but I think you could actually get published lists. That's
Yeah, you do.
probably like a great like start. If you got absolutely nothing and you want to
Yeah.
start doing something, you could do that. Collect it over time. Don't go bankrupt.
Yeah.
But you can start to collect those things, and I think that's a great starting point.
And
Okay.
last thing I just thought of, we're getting down on time, but is the Army FM survival manual. It's it's basic. There's better ones and worse ones, but I that's in my go bag. It's got some ideas.
Easy reading, or worst case scenario, extra toilet paper.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, there you go.
um, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you got something useful out of it, and we will catch you in the next one.
Be
See ya.
safe.